Son of a bitch, what the hell is this doing in your bag? That was the first thing that flew out of my mouth when I unzipped Greg's gym bag and pulled out a slick little bottle of massage oil. My hands froze, the room spun, and I swear my heart dropped into my stomach. 40 years together, and I knew what belonged to us and what didn't. That bottle didn't belong in my marriage. It was a stranger sitting in my living room. I sat there holding it, my mind racing, hearing Greg's laugh in my head, the laugh he used when he told our neighbors I was overprotective. For a second, I thought about walking straight into the living room and throwing the damn thing at his face. But instead, I kept quiet. My silence was louder than any scream. I had another plan forming, cold and steady. I'm so glad you're here. If you're watching this video, please like and subscribe to my channel, and tell me in the comments where you're listening to my story of revenge from. I want to know how far my story will travel, because this one is about to get messy. My name is Marta Roberts. I'm 68 years old, and I've spent most of my life believing loyalty meant something, that love and vows actually held weight. That night, staring at that bottle, I realized maybe I was the only one who believed. I held it up to the light. The golden liquid inside looked almost innocent. But I knew better. Greg hadn't touched me in years, always too tired, always too stressed. And now suddenly he needed this. My throat burned. I walked into the garage and opened the tool drawer. My fingers wrapped around a tube of industrial clear glue, the kind that sealed furniture joints forever. I twisted the cap, squeezed slowly until the thick glue filled the bottle drop by drop. My hands didn't shake. They were calm, steady, as if I had been preparing for this moment all along. When it was full, I shook it gently, tested the nozzle. It came out smooth, just like oil. No one looking at it would know. I wiped the tip clean, screwed the cap back on, and slid it right into his bag where I found it. The air in the garage smelled of grease and betrayal. I walked back into the house, every step measured. On the wall, the old clock ticked like a hammer against my ribs. Each beat said liar. Each beat said fool. I dropped into a chair at the kitchen table and stared at the bottle of hand soap by the sink, scrubbing my fingers, even though there was no residue. I wanted to wash off the thought of him touching someone else, sliding this bottle across another woman's skin. I whispered to myself, "Not yet, Marta. Not yet." I wasn't going to storm into his face with accusations he could deny. I wasn't going to scream like some crazy old woman. No, I was going to make sure the truth screamed for me. I heard Greg's car pull up. He walked in whistling, jacket slung over his shoulder, and kissed the top of my head like nothing in the world was wrong. I looked at him, my lips pressed tight, my eyes calm. He poured himself a drink, kicked off his shoes, and went upstairs humming. In that moment, I promised myself. He thought he had hidden everything. He thought I was blind, stupid, too old to notice. But I saw. I noticed every lie in his eyes, and I was done letting him write the story. I leaned back in the chair, folded my hands, and breathed slow. Soon enough he would reach for that bottle, and when he did, he wouldn't just meet his mistress. He would meet me. He would meet the revenge of a woman who had nothing left to lose. The house was silent, except for the steady tick of the clock and the faint squeak of bed springs upstairs. I sat in the dim kitchen, my plan already in motion, and whispered, "You want to play games, Greg? Let's play." I sat in the kitchen long after Greg had gone upstairs, the sound of his footsteps fading, the creak of the bed settling under his weight. The silence pressed down, and I let it hold me because silence was where memory lived. When you have been married as long as I have, Silence carries more weight than words. It reminded me of everything I had done, everything I had carried, and everything he had taken for granted. 40 years ago, I was a young woman who thought work and love could build something permanent. I believed if I gave enough of myself, there would always be a return. I worked from dawn until midnight, taking every client who walked through the door, learning every therapy method, and teaching myself how to run a business from scraps of advice and late-night reading. The first spa was nothing more than a rented basement room that smelled of damp plaster. I painted the walls pale blue with my own hands. I set up one massage table, second-hand, covered with linen I sewed from old sheets. It grew because I refused to give up. When there was not enough money to pay rent, I baked bread for the landlord's family to buy myself more time. When clients asked for treatments I could not afford, I improvised with herbs from the garden and hot stones from the river. Bit by bit, the reputation built. Word of mouth spread. Women came not just for a massage, but because they trusted me to listen when no one else did. Greg had a steady job then, something safe that kept food on the table. He came home every night tired, and I did not complain. I carried the weight of the business because I believed we were a team. He smiled when the spa finally turned a profit, and he liked to boast about it. Marta is the brains. I just cheer her on, he would say at family gatherings. I used to beam with pride when he said it. It sounded like love. As the spa grew, I opened another location, then another. Contracts came in from hotels and resorts. I spent nights on the floor, going over invoices, signing deals, pushing myself harder. I sacrificed birthdays, holidays, even rest, because I thought I was building for us. By the time we hit 12 million in assets, Greg had reinvented himself. He no longer called himself the cheerleader. Now he introduced himself to anyone new as co-founder of Roberts Wellness. I used to laugh it off, not wanting to embarrass him, but the truth stung. He never lifted a single massage stone. He never signed a supplier check. He never spent sleepless nights wondering how to cover payroll. Still, I let him have the title. Maybe it was my weakness. I told myself it didn't matter who got the credit as long as the family was secure. But deep down, I think I wanted him to be proud of me. I wanted him to see that I had turned nothing into something, that our name meant something in the community. I remember the day the third spa opened. I was exhausted, running on coffee and adrenaline, when Greg walked in wearing a suit and tie. He shook hands with the mayor like he had built the place himself. Reporters snapped photos, and when the local paper ran the headline, "Roberts couple expands wellness empire," he framed it and hung it in his office. He liked the word empire. I liked the word couple. We were not the same. The empire grew, but so did the cracks. The more successful we became, the more Greg distanced himself from the actual work. He enjoyed the attention, the dinners, the compliments, but when it came to the grind, he was absent. I told myself it was fine. I was strong enough to carry both of us. But strength has a price. My hands ached, my back stiffened, and the lines on my face deepened with every year. He never noticed the way exhaustion hollowed me out. Or maybe he noticed and chose to look away. Instead, he started talking more about retirement, about selling shares, about enjoying life. I always told him not yet. There was still more to do, more to build. He would sigh and pour another drink. I could forgive the laziness. I could forgive the vanity of calling himself co-founder. What I cannot forgive is betrayal. All those years, I thought my sacrifices meant something to him, that he would at least value the foundation I built. But when I saw that bottle in his bag, every memory of him claiming credit burned like acid in my throat. It was never about us, it was about him, and now it was about someone else entirely. I looked around the kitchen and saw ghosts of my labour everywhere. The custom cabinets bought after the fifth spa opened, the granite counter chosen after our biggest hotel contract, the clock on the wall, ticking, a gift from my mother on the day I cut the ribbon on my second location. Every item in this house was built on my sweat, and the man upstairs, snoring softly, thought he could just walk away with all of it. I leaned forward, pressing my palms flat on the table, and whispered to the quiet room, "You think you built this, Greg, but you didn't. I did. And if you want to throw it away for her, you will lose it all." The weight of 4 decades pressed against my chest, not as weakness, but as armor. I had carried him, carried the business, carried the family. I could carry the fight. What he did not understand is that a woman who has carried everything has nothing left to fear. I turned off the kitchen light and walked upstairs, pausing at the doorway of our bedroom. Greg lay sprawled on the bed, mouth open, a half-empty glass of bourbon on the nightstand. He looked harmless, almost pathetic. But I knew better. That man was plotting a life that erased me. He thought I would stay quiet, sign papers, fade away. I shut the door softly, not to protect his sleep, but to contain my rage. My story was no longer about what I built. It was about what I was going to destroy. The morning light slipped through the curtains, pale and cold, when Greg came into the kitchen dressed in one of his tailored suits. He smelled faintly of cologne, the sharp kind he only wore when he wanted to impress someone. He poured coffee, barely looking at me, and said he had a retreat to attend in Colorado. His voice was smooth, rehearsed, like he had practiced the line in the mirror. I nodded, but my eyes followed every move. When he left, I picked up his discarded jacket from the chair. A folded receipt slipped out of the pocket. The paper was crisp, the ink fresh. I opened it and my stomach tightened. It was from a fine dining restaurant in Aspen. Not Colorado Springs. Not Denver. Aspen. He had ordered a bottle of wine, one that cost more than most people's rent, and 2 entrees. It was dated last night. I stood there with the receipt in my hand, staring at the numbers until they blurred. He had told me he was meeting wellness executives in Colorado Springs. He had even kissed me on the forehead before leaving. But the receipt did not lie. Aspen was not a place for business retreats. Aspen was where people went to indulge. I walked to the laundry room and opened the hamper. His shirt from the night before was crumpled at the top. I lifted it, and the scent hit me hard. Not just his cologne, but something else. Something sweet and floral. A woman's perfume, clinging stubbornly to the fabric. I pressed the shirt to my nose and felt the heat rise in my chest. I whispered into the empty room, "You really think I am blind, Greg? You really think I would never notice?" I folded the shirt slowly, set it aside, and pulled out his travel bag. Inside, I found a toiletry kit, toothbrush, razor, all neatly packed. But tucked into a side pocket was a hotel key card. The logo printed across the plastic was from one of Aspen's most expensive resorts. I traced the letters with my thumb, the weight of it heavy against my skin. He was not even careful anymore. I carried the card back into the kitchen, sat down at the table, and placed it next to the receipt. The evidence lined up in front of me like witnesses ready to testify. He had built his lie carefully, but he underestimated me. I had built an empire. I knew how to read the small signs, the tiny cracks people thought they could cover. The old clock on the wall ticked steadily, each second punctuating the truth. For years, Greg told me he was tired, that his back hurt, that intimacy was behind us. He said we had grown into something deeper than physical love. I believed him, or at least I wanted to. But the perfume on his shirt told a different story. The receipt told another, and the hotel card sealed it. When he came home that evening, I was ready. He walked in carrying his briefcase, smiling like nothing was wrong. He poured himself another drink, loosened his tie, and leaned against the counter. "Long day," he muttered, sipping bourbon. "Colorado Springs?" I asked, my voice calm. He froze for just a second, then nodded. "Yes, meetings dragged. Exhausting." I placed the receipt on the counter between us. His eyes flicked down, then back up, his jaw tightening. "Aspen," I said quietly. His smile faltered. He set down the glass and tried to recover. "I stopped for dinner. Harmless. You know how it is, Marta. Clients seek a good meal. 2 entrees, a bottle of wine." He chuckled, but it sounded hollow. The waiter probably made a mistake. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. "You think I don't know what perfume smells like, Greg? You think I don't see what's right in front of me?" He straightened, his eyes narrowing. "Don't start this, Marta. You're imagining things. You always let your head spin wild when you should trust me." I stared at him, letting the silence stretch. His face tightened, then he picked up his drink again as if that would wash away the truth. I didn't press further. Not yet. I tucked the receipt back into my pocket and turned away. I knew he would deny, lie, twist every word. That was his way. But he had already slipped, and I was not going to let it pass. That night, as he snored beside me, I lay awake replaying every detail. The perfume, the receipt, the hotel card, lies layered on top of lies. The Greg I thought I knew was gone. In his place was a man who thought he could outsmart me, who thought age had dulled my mind. He was wrong. The next morning, I rose early and stood in front of the mirror. My reflection stared back, lines etched deep, eyes sharp. For a moment, I let myself feel the ache of betrayal. Then I pushed it down and let something colder take its place. I whispered to the mirror, "You wanted to play games, Greg. Fine. But you forgot who taught you how to play." I walked back into the kitchen, opened the drawer, and laid out the hotel card and receipt once more. They sat there like trophies of a war not yet won. I was not going to scream or beg. I was going to gather, piece by piece, until his own lies buried him. The day stretched ahead of me, heavy with decisions. But one thing was certain. Greg had crossed a line, and I was no longer the woman who overlooked. I was the woman who prepared. I was in the office late that night, going through invoices and supply orders, when the computer screen blinked with a new notification. Greg never used email. He always said it was too complicated, that he preferred calls or face-to-face talks. My first thought was spam, but the subject line caught my eye. Just a few words. I clicked, and my breath caught in my throat. "You were incredible tonight, Dad," followed by a red heart. I stared at it, the words blurring, the heart flashing like a cruel joke. Dad. That single word hit me harder than any betrayal I had imagined. I leaned back in the chair, my hands trembling, the office spinning around me. Who would call him that in such a tone? Who would write that and think it was acceptable? I scrolled quickly, hoping for context. But the sender was nothing but a string of random characters. No name, no clue. Just that sentence, short and sharp, like a knife across my chest. My mind raced. He had a son or daughter somewhere? No, it made no sense. We had Sophia. That was it. And Sophia she would never write something like this. The air in the room felt heavy, pressing down on me until I could hardly breathe. I walked to the window and pulled it open, letting the night air hit my face. But it didn't help. My stomach churned with dread. I walked back to the desk and opened the drawers, searching for anything, any proof that this was just a sick mistake. Instead, I found a receipt folded neatly inside a file folder. It was from another night, another restaurant, 2 dinners, expensive wine. My throat tightened. Each piece was fitting together, not cleanly but jagged, slicing me open with every edge. I heard Greg upstairs, humming softly, like he had no weight on his shoulders at all. I clenched the receipt in my hand until it crumpled. The man I had given my life to was not just lying to me. He was mocking me. I took the phone again, rereading that single line. "You were incredible tonight, Dad." The word echoed in my mind, twisting into something darker each time. Maybe it wasn't a child at all. Maybe it was a nickname, something intimate, something lovers whispered in shadows. My stomach turned. The clock ticked past midnight, the sound pounding against my skull. I finally placed the phone back exactly where it was, careful not to leave a trace. I sat at the table in the dark, my head in my hands, my pulse racing. 40 years of marriage, 40 years of sacrifice, and now this. When Greg came down the next morning, he looked refreshed, as if the night had been nothing but rest. He poured his coffee, kissed me on the cheek, and muttered something about meetings. I forced a smile, my body stiff, my voice calm. "Did you sleep well?" he asked, not even looking at me. "Yes," I said softly. My eyes followed him as he sipped his coffee, checking his watch, tapping his foot. A man in a hurry, but not in a hurry for me. He grabbed his briefcase and left, the door closing with a soft click. I sat down heavily, staring at the empty mug on the counter. My chest hurt, but not from grief anymore. It was something colder, heavier. I pulled the laptop back to me, logged into his email while the memory was still fresh. Nothing. The inbox was wiped clean, not even the message I had seen hours earlier. Drafts empty, trash empty. He was careful, too careful. That was when I realized this wasn't the first time. This had been going on for a long while, hidden in plain sight. My hands steadied, my heart slowing. The shock had passed. What replaced it was determination. I cleaned the kitchen, moved slowly, deliberately, each dish stacked with care. My mind was somewhere else entirely, replaying every lie he had told, every excuse about business dinners, every retreat, every late night. I thought of the way he looked at me now, with impatience, as if I were in his way. The phone buzzed on the counter. A text came through, but when I reached for it, Greg had left it locked. No preview, just a flash of light across the screen. I set it back down, my jaw tightening. I whispered to myself, "You think you've hidden it all, Greg, but you slipped, and I saw it." That night, I pretended to be tired and went to bed early. He stayed up, pacing, taking calls in another room. His voice was low, muffled, but the tone was unmistakable. Affectionate, eager, not the way he spoke to me anymore. I turned to the wall, staring at the shadows cast by the lamp outside, listening. The sound of his laughter cut through the silence, sharp and cruel. I shut my eyes, breathing slow, forcing myself to stay still. He came to bed later, smelling faintly of perfume again. He slid under the sheets, turned his back, and within minutes he was snoring. I lay awake, wide-eyed, staring at the ceiling. My chest rose and fell with each steady breath, but inside I was burning. The truth was no longer hidden. It was here, in my home, in my bed. in my face. And I knew now there was no going back. The morning started like any other. I was arranging fresh flowers in the spa lobby when Mrs. Grant, one of my longest clients, walked in. She had been coming to me for 20 years, back when I only had one massage table and a bottle of lavender oil. She smiled politely, but her eyes darted around as if she carried a secret she wasn't sure she should tell. "Marta, I wasn't sure if I should say anything," she began softly, lowering her voice even though the lobby was empty. "But I saw Greg last night." I kept my hands steady, adjusting the vase, though my chest tightened. "Where?" Her face shifted, discomfort written in her lines. "At the Aurora Hotel. He was with a younger woman, tall, dark hair. They were walking into the lounge very close, closer than they should have been. The vase nearly slipped from my fingers, but I held on. I smiled faintly, thanked her, and sent her into her session. My hands were trembling as I set the flowers down. I knew Mrs. Grant wasn't lying. She had no reason to. That small act of kindness, her decision to tell me, felt like confirmation of what I had been piecing together. That night, I called an old friend, Mrs. Peterson, who had once mentioned a private investigator she knew. Her voice was calm when she answered, but when I told her what I needed, she went quiet for a long moment. "Marta," she said finally, "are you sure?" "I'm sure," I replied. "I need the truth." She gave me the number. I dialed it before I could lose my nerve. A man answered, his tone brisk but professional. His name was Thomas. I explained what I needed, my voice low and even though my heart raced. He didn't ask unnecessary questions. He simply said, "I'll start tonight. Give me any details you have on his schedule." I provided what I knew: the retreats, the supposed dinners, the cars he drove. When I hung up, my hands were clammy, but a strange sense of relief settled in. For the first time, I wasn't just reacting. I was moving forward. The next 2 days passed like a fog. Greg claimed he had a late meeting one evening, then a networking dinner the next. He came home smelling faintly of cologne each time, his tie loosened, his eyes glazed from too much wine. I watched him, nodding, never asking questions. He probably thought I had grown too tired to fight. On the third day, Thomas called. "Mrs. Roberts, I have something you should see. Can we meet tomorrow at the cafe on 5th Street? Noon sharp." I agreed, my voice steady though my stomach churned. That night I barely slept. I lay beside Greg, listening to his even breaths, and thought about the years I had given him. My eyes stayed open until the sky turned pale. At noon the next day, I walked into the cafe. Thomas was already there, a stocky man in his 50s, with eyes that missed nothing. He pushed a small envelope across the table. Inside were photographs. My heart clenched as I flipped through them. Greg, standing in front of the Aurora Hotel. Greg holding the door open for Angela, her hair loose, her hand resting casually on his arm. Another photo of them in the restaurant, leaning close over a candle-lit table, glasses raised in a private toast. The final one made my breath stop. They were in the parking lot, their faces inches apart, his hand on her waist, her lips curved in a smile that wasn't meant for my eyes. I set the photos down, my palms flat on the table, forcing myself to breathe. "These were taken last night," Thomas said quietly. "There's more. Conversations recorded. I haven't finished processing them, but this is enough to confirm your suspicions." I nodded, my throat dry. "Thank you." He studied me for a moment. "You're calm." I looked at him, my voice low but firm. "I've been preparing for this. I don't need drama. I need facts." He gave me a small nod, as if he respected that answer, and promised to send updates. I left the cafe with the envelope tucked under my arm. The sun felt too bright, the street too noisy, as if the world was mocking me with its normalcy while my own had shifted. At home, I spread the photos across the kitchen table, staring at them one by one. Angela's smile, Greg's hand, the casual intimacy between them, like it had been happening for months, maybe years. I thought of Sophia, my daughter, who still called Angela her closest friend. The betrayal doubled, sharp and cutting. When Greg came home that evening, I greeted him with dinner on the table, the photos hidden away. He kissed my cheek, muttered something about traffic, and sat down like nothing had changed. I watched him eat, each bite casual, each sip of wine smooth. He didn't see the storm building across from him. Later, as he drifted off to sleep, I sat in the dim light of the hallway, holding the envelope. My eyes burned, but no tears fell. Tears would give him too much power. Instead, I thought of the glue I had placed in his bag. I thought of the perfume, the emails, the lies. The truth was out now, confirmed, undeniable. And knowing Greg, he would still deny it until his last breath. That was fine. I didn't need his confession. I had what I needed. I whispered to myself, "You wanted to erase me, Greg, but you forgot one thing. I am still here." The house was silent, but inside me, something had shifted. I was no longer chasing proof. I had it. The next steps would be mine to decide. And for the first time in years, I felt stronger than the lies surrounding me. Thomas called again 2 nights later. His voice was steady, but there was something heavier beneath it. "Mrs. Roberts, I have more than photos now. We need to meet again." I met him at the same cafe. He didn't waste time with greetings. He slid a flash drive across the table and opened a small notebook filled with his handwriting. "I recorded their conversation outside the Aurora Hotel," he said. "Listen carefully." I plugged in my headphones, pressed play, and heard Greg's voice loud and clear. "We'll get Marta to sign the papers. She won't know what she's looking at. She trusts me too much." Angela laughed, the sound cold and sharp. "And if she hesitates, we'll tell her it's for expansion. By the time she realizes, the spa and all the properties will be in our names. Then we sell, split the money, and she can knit sweaters somewhere. She'll be out of the picture." My grip on the table tightened. Greg's voice came again, calmer but cutting. $12 million is worth the trouble. Marta won't fight. She never does." I removed the headphones and sat in silence. The cafe noise faded around me. My marriage wasn't just broken. It was being carved up like a carcass for them to feast on. Thomas spoke carefully. "This isn't just infidelity. This is fraud. They're planning to strip you of everything." I nodded once, forcing the rage down until it was cold. "I understand." When I left, I carried the drive in my purse, its weight heavier than any stone. I walked slowly through the city, every step harder than the last. I thought of the long nights at the spa, the sacrifices, the way Greg used to smile when he told people I was the hard-working one. Now I knew those smiles were masks. At home, I laid the photos and the transcript side by side on the dining table. Their words were burned into me. $12 million. Expansion. Out of the picture. I touched each photo with my fingertip, committing every detail to memory. Greg came in late that night, whistling like a man without a care. He kissed my cheek and poured himself a drink. I stayed seated at the table, my face calm, my body still. "How was your day?" he asked. "Busy, I answered. Yours? Meetings. Always meetings, he muttered, swirling the bourbon in his glass. He never noticed the envelope tucked under a pile of papers, the evidence inches from his hand. Later, as he drifted to sleep, I stood at the edge of the bed, watching his face in the glow of the lamp. He looked peaceful, like a man who thought he was untouchable. My chest rose and fell slowly, but inside me the storm was steady. The next morning he tried again. Over breakfast, he slid a folder across the table. I need you to sign this. It's just paperwork for the new spa expansion. Nothing complicated. I looked at the folder but didn't touch it. What kind of expansion? He smiled, too easily. A wellness retreat up north. Investors are excited. It's all routine. I pushed the folder back toward him. Leave it. I'll look at it later. His jaw tightened for a second before he covered it with a laugh. Don't overthink it, Marta. You've always trusted me with business. Nothing's changed. But everything had changed, and I wasn't signing a single page. That afternoon, I drove to the newest spa location and walked the halls. Employees greeted me warmly. Clients smiled as they passed. This was mine. My blood, my labor, my name on the door. And Greg wanted to rip it all away. I sat in the office, the sound of the fountain in the lobby trickling faintly through the walls, and thought of Angela's words on the recording. She can knit sweaters somewhere. The cruelty of it made my skin prickle. She wasn't just taking my husband. She was spitting on my life's work. When I got home, Greg was waiting. He stood in the kitchen with another folder in his hand. Marta, we need to move fast. Investors want this done by next week. Sign these and we'll be set for life. I met his eyes, calm and unflinching. If it's such a good deal, it can wait until I've read it. His smile vanished for a moment, and his true face showed. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. I held his gaze. I won't be rushed. He slammed the folder on the counter, the sound sharp. You never understood business. You just know how to work yourself to the bone. Let me handle this. I turned away, my voice low but steady. I'll handle it in my own time. The silence that followed was thick. He picked up the folder, muttered under his breath, and stormed upstairs. I stayed in the kitchen, my hands gripping the counter, my heartbeat steady. I had seen enough, heard enough, gathered enough. They thought I was weak, too old, too tired. But they had no idea what was coming. Greg did not waste time hiding his intentions anymore. The morning after our last argument, he came downstairs in a pressed shirt, folder in hand, his face set. He dropped the papers on the table where I was drinking coffee. Marta, this is it, he said sharply. I need your signature today. We're finalizing the deal. I looked at the folder but didn't touch it. I told you I would read it when I'm ready. He leaned in close, his voice low. Stop stalling. Do you want us to lose millions because you can't make a simple decision? My hands stayed steady on the cup. I won't sign something I don't understand. Greg's eyes narrowed, frustration boiling over. You've lived off my business sense for years. Do you think all this came from your massages and candles? Without me, you'd still be in that basement room rubbing people's backs for $20 an hour. The words cut, but I let them pass over me. He wanted me rattled. He wanted me to lash out. Instead, I sipped my coffee slowly, the bitterness grounding me. The sound of heels clicked across the tile. Angela walked in, her perfume trailing behind her like smoke. She had never come to the house uninvited before. She looked at me with a tight smile that barely hid her disdain. Marta, she said, settling into a chair as if she owned it. I heard you've been hesitating. That's not smart. This deal is going to change everything for Greg. For me. For the family. My stomach tightened, but I stayed silent, letting her talk. She leaned forward, eyes sharp. You should sign. The spa industry is changing, and you're not young anymore. Let us handle it before you drag the whole thing into the ground. Greg smirked at her words, as if she had said exactly what he wanted to hear. He turned to me. See? Even Angela understands. You're clinging to control you can't keep. I finally spoke, my voice even. It's my name on those doors. My years of work. I won't be pushed. Angela's smile faded, her tone turning cruel. Do you really think anyone comes because of your name? They come for the brand, for the look Greg built, for the future I can bring. You're just in the way. Greg placed a heavy hand on the folder. Sign it. Today. I looked at them both, their faces lined with greed, their arrogance filling the room. No. The word hung in the air like a blade. Greg's fist slammed against the table, rattling the cup. You're being stubborn, Marta. Don't make me force this. I stood slowly, pushing back my chair. Force me then. Show me what you really are. For a moment, silence pressed between us. Angela's eyes darted nervously, then hardened again. You'll regret this, she hissed. When the investors walk away, when you're left with nothing, don't come crying. I stepped past her, the faint smell of her perfume turning sour in my nose. The only thing I regret is letting you in my house. Greg muttered curses under his breath, but he didn't follow me. I walked into the backyard, breathing in the cool air, my body steady even as my heart pounded. The days that followed grew more hostile. Greg stopped pretending to be gentle. He left contracts scattered on the counter, highlighted sections circled in red. He called lawyers in loud voices, making sure I heard every word. Angela showed up at the spas, strutting through the lobby like a queen, whispering to staff that changes were coming. Some employees looked at me with concern, others with confusion. I smiled at them, but inside I burned. At dinner one night, Greg leaned across the table, his eyes cold. If you don't sign, I'll take you to court. I'll say you're unfit, that your mind is slipping. Do you want that kind of humiliation? I set down my fork. Try it. His face twisted. Don't test me. Angela reached for his arm, murmuring, She'll break soon. Just keep pressing. I sat back, studying them both. They thought they were closing in, that their pressure would crack me. But they didn't see the steel settling inside me. They didn't see the trap tightening around their own ankles. I cleared the plates without another word. Greg poured himself another drink, muttering about how ungrateful I was, how blind I was to opportunity. Angela laughed softly, her voice slithering through the room. That night, I lay awake again, staring at the ceiling while Greg snored beside me. His threats replayed in my mind. Court, humiliation, stripping me of everything I had built. He believed I was cornered, but he didn't know I had already set the stage. Every signature he demanded, every insult Angela spat, every whisper in the spa halls, they were building my case for me. The more they pushed, the more they revealed who they truly were. I whispered into the darkness, my voice steady. Keep pushing. Keep showing me your true faces. The fall will be harder when it comes. The tension in the house grew thick enough to choke on. Greg no longer bothered with charm, and Angela strutted around the spas as if she already owned them. Every word from their mouths was pressure, threats, and veiled insults. I let it all wash over me, nodding when needed, silent when they expected me to argue. They thought my quiet meant surrender. They had no idea it was the sound of a trap being set. I began keeping everything, every receipt, every email printout, every photo Thomas had taken. I bought a small safe and tucked it in the back of the storage closet, behind stacked towels no one touched. Inside, I arranged the evidence with care. Photos of Greg and Angela at the hotel, transcripts of their conversations, copies of the contracts he shoved at me. It was no longer just suspicion or betrayal. It was a case being built, piece by piece. At night, when Greg fell asleep, I slipped quietly into his office. His desk drawers were locked, but I had lived with him long enough to know where he hid keys. A tiny brass one taped under the bottom of his chair. I opened the drawer and found another set of documents, drafts of contracts, emails printed and highlighted. My name was listed as co-owner, but in every draft he had written plans for transferring my shares. The date on one contract was only 2 weeks away. My fingers trembled as I photographed each page with my phone. Then I slid them back, exactly as I had found them. The next morning, Greg eyed me over his coffee. "You look tired," he said, smirking. "Maybe it's time you step back. You've worked long enough. Let me and Angela carry the load." I kept my face calm. "Maybe you're right. Maybe it is time I let someone else carry it." His smile widened, thinking he had won. But I wasn't giving him the victory. I was buying myself more time. Angela came to the spa later that day, heels clicking against the marble floor, sunglasses perched on her head. She leaned against the reception desk and said loudly enough for staff to hear, "Change is coming. Marta will be resting soon. You'll all be under new leadership." I stood in the doorway of my office and watched the employees shift nervously. I forced a smile and said, "Nothing changes until my signature is on paper, and my pen has been dry for a long time." Angela's smirk faltered for a moment, but she quickly recovered. "We'll see about that." That evening, I sat alone in the kitchen, laying out everything I had collected. Evidence filled the table like puzzle pieces, forming the picture of their greed. I pulled out a notebook and began writing dates, times, names, and places. If they wanted a war, I would give them one with precision. But evidence wasn't enough. I needed a plan that would not just prove them wrong, but humiliate them, strip them of the power they wielded so arrogantly. The thought of Greg's voice saying I was unfit, that my mind was slipping, still burned in my ears. If he wanted to play that game, then I would show him just how sharp my mind remained. The idea came slowly, forming in the silence of the night. The bottle of glue sat hidden where I had placed it weeks before, waiting. I thought of the hotel, the secrecy, the lies. They believed the world belonged to them when the doors were shut. What if those doors opened to the wrong people at the right time? I contacted Thomas again. We met in his office this time, a quiet corner above a hardware store. I slid the photos and notes across his desk. "I need more," I told him. "I need recordings inside, not just outside. And I need timing, where they meet, when they leave." He nodded, flipping through the pages. "You're not looking just for proof. You want exposure." "Exactly," I said. "I don't want him whispering lies in court. I want him choking on the truth in public." Thomas studied me for a long moment before saying, "Then you'll need patience and precision." I gave a small smile. Patience I have. Precision I've been practicing all my life. When I left his office, the weight in my chest felt lighter. Not gone, but shifted into something sharper. I had been pushed into a corner, but from that corner, I had found the clearest view of my enemies. Back at home, Greg tried again with his folder of contracts. He slid it across the table and said, "Sign this, and you can finally rest. Isn't that what you want, Marta? To stop working yourself to death?" I touched the folder, then pushed it back. "When I stop, it will be on my terms, not yours." His face twisted with anger, his voice rising. "You're going to ruin everything. You think people will stand behind you when you're too weak to carry this business?" I stood slowly, meeting his eyes. "I carried this business before you even cared to look at it, and I'll carry it long after you're gone." He slammed his fist on the table, but I didn't flinch. I walked out of the room, leaving him fuming behind me. In my bedroom, I sat on the edge of the bed, the plan forming clearer in my mind. Let them believe I was weak. Let them believe I was blind. Every move they made now only added fuel to the fire I was about to light. The clock ticked steady on the nightstand. I leaned back against the pillows and whispered, "Soon." The night came when all the pieces lined up. Greg told me he would be gone for another business dinner. His tone was smooth, but I had already learned to hear the cracks. I waited until I heard his car pull away. Then I called Thomas. He confirmed what I already suspected. Greg and Angela had booked a suite at the Riverside Hotel. I drove there ahead of them, my heart steady, not racing. This was not panic anymore. It was purpose. The bottle I had tampered with weeks before was already tucked into Greg's bag. All I needed to do was set the stage. I slipped into the service corridor, a place I knew well from years of working with hotels. With Thomas's help, I had access to the control room. One pull on the alarm would trigger the sprinkler system in the suite, not enough to endanger anyone, but enough to expose them. I left the corridor and waited in the lobby. They arrived together, Angela in a red dress, Greg with his hand pressed to her back. They didn't even look around. They thought the world was theirs. They walked past me without a glance, laughing, and stepped into the elevator. I followed after a few minutes, staying quiet. By the time I reached the floor, their voices carried down the hall, muffled but clear enough. I waited, timing each step. When the door finally clicked shut behind them, I gave Thomas the signal. The alarm would be ready. Inside the suite, the plan unfolded as I knew it would. Later, I would hear the recording, but even without sound, I could picture it. Greg, reaching for the bottle. Angela, smiling with her practiced charm. And then silence turning to panic. The alarm blared, red lights flashing, sprinklers burst from the ceiling, drenching the suite in cold water. Their voices rose above the chaos. Angela screamed, high and sharp. "Greg, I can't move. What did you do?" His voice was deeper, filled with rage and fear. "Shut up. Just shut up and help me. We're stuck." I stayed in the hallway, listening to the commotion. Other guests peeked out of their doors, confused, phones already in their hands. Staff rushed up the stairs, radios crackling. The fire alarm's echo filled every corner. The door to their suite slammed open. A hotel manager stepped in, followed by two security guards. They froze at the sight, their eyes wide. Greg and Angela were tangled together on the bed, sheets clinging to their soaked bodies, their skin glued where it touched. They were screaming, clawing, cursing. "Help us!" Greg bellowed, his face twisted. "Get us out of here now!" Angela sobbed, her mascara running down her face. "It burns! Oh God, it burns!" The guards looked at each other in disbelief. One of them muttered, "What the hell?" before pulling out his phone. Within minutes, the hotel staff had called emergency services. The sirens grew louder outside, flashing lights filling the windows. Firefighters stormed the hall, followed by paramedics. I stood back, blending into the crowd, my eyes steady on the door. The firefighters rushed in, hoses ready, then froze when they saw there was no fire. Just two people glued together in their humiliation. Guests gathered in the hallway, whispering, recording, their cameras catching every detail. The red dress clinging to Angela, the veins standing out in Greg's neck as he screamed. One paramedic tried to assess the scene, his voice calm but tight. "We need solvent. We need to cut them loose carefully." Greg roared again. "Just get us out of here. Cover us up. Don't let anyone see." But everyone was already watching. Phones were raised, flashes sparking. A woman gasped loudly, then laughed, unable to help herself. Another whispered to her husband, "That's Roberts, the spa man. And isn't that his daughter's friend?" The murmur spread quickly, each word slicing through what little pride Greg had left. Angela tried to shield her face, but the water kept pouring, her hair plastered to her skin. The firefighters finally carried them out, wrapped in damp sheets, but it did nothing to hide their disgrace. Cameras followed, recording as they were loaded onto stretchers and pushed down the hall. Every guest craned to see, some covering their mouths in shock, others smirking openly. I followed slowly behind the crowd, my steps even. I watched as Greg locked eyes with me for a brief second when the stretcher turned the corner. His face was pale, his mouth opening to shout, but no words came. He knew exactly who had set this in motion. I turned away, my expression calm. The night air outside was cool, filled with the flashing lights of emergency vehicles. Reporters had already arrived, tipped off by someone in the crowd. Questions flew, microphones thrust forward, cameras rolling. Greg and Angela had no escape, their shame broadcast before they even reached the ambulance. I stood at the edge of the sidewalk, unseen in the chaos. My heart didn't race. My hands didn't shake. For the first time in weeks, I felt steady. They had believed they could strip me of everything in silence. Instead, their lies had been drowned in water, sirens, and the eyes of the world. The hotel incident spread faster than I could have imagined. By morning, photos and shaky videos were everywhere online. People whispered about Greg and Angela in grocery stores, laughed about them in cafes. What was meant to be private lust had turned into a public spectacle. But humiliation was only the first step. The next was destruction. 2 days later, the Wellness Expo opened at the downtown convention center. Greg had been bragging about it for months, telling anyone who would listen that he was sealing a $5 million investment. Investors from overseas had flown in. It was supposed to be his victory lap, proof that he was a visionary in the wellness world. I dressed carefully that morning. A simple navy dress, my hair pinned back, a folder tucked under my arm. Inside were photos, transcripts, and a flash drive loaded with recordings Thomas had gathered. Evidence that Greg and Angela weren't just cheaters, but thieves. When I arrived, the lobby buzzed with excitement. Posters of Greg's face lined the walls. His name was on the program, listed as keynote speaker. My stomach tightened, but I walked through the crowd as if I belonged. No one stopped me. After 40 years of building this empire, no one could tell me I didn't. I slipped into the main hall, rows of chairs filled quickly. On stage, Greg adjusted his tie, his smile rehearsed. Angela stood near the wings, trying to look poised, though her face was still puffy from the hospital ordeal. The whispers followed them both. People had seen the videos. They couldn't erase that. Greg stepped up to the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here. Today we celebrate growth, innovation, and the future of Roberts Wellness." His voice was strong, but I could hear the strain beneath it. He clicked a remote, and the screen behind him lit up with slides about expansion, partnerships, profit margins. Investors nodded, taking notes. He was good at this, I'll give him that. A liar who wore confidence like a second skin. When he shifted to the financials, I moved. I walked down the aisle slowly, each step steady, until I reached the front row. My heels echoed on the polished floor. Greg faltered for just a moment, his eyes flicking to me, then back to the crowd. I waited until the applause after his slide, then I stood. "Before you invest," I said loudly, my voice cutting through the room, "there's something you should see." The hall went silent. Heads turned, Greg's face drained of color. "Marta," he stammered, "sit down. This isn't the time." I ignored him and stepped onto the stage. I placed the flash drive into the laptop connected to the projector. Within seconds, the screen behind us flickered and shifted. Not charts, not numbers, photos. Greg and Angela outside the hotel, hand in hand, Greg kissing her cheek, Angela leaning into him, her smile smug. Gasps rippled through the audience. Someone muttered, "Isn't that his daughter's friend?" Greg lunged toward me, but I held up my hand. "That's only the beginning." The video started. Greg's voice filled the hall. "We'll get Marta to sign the papers. She won't know what she's looking at. She trusts me too much." Angela's laugh followed. "And if she hesitates, we'll tell her it's for expansion. By the time she realizes, the spa and all the properties will be in our names. Then we sell, split the money, and she can knit sweaters somewhere." The audience shifted uncomfortably. Murmurs grew louder. An investor in the front row slammed his notebook shut. Greg shouted, "Turn it off! This is private. This is out of context." But the recording kept going. His voice again, calm and cold. $12 million is worth the trouble. Marta won't fight. She never does." I turned to the audience, my voice steady. "For 40 years I built this company. Every contract, every spa, every client was my work. And this man, my husband, plotted to erase me. He is not the founder. He is not the visionary. He is a fraud. And she," I pointed to Angela, trembling at the side of the stage, "is his accomplice." Chaos erupted. Investors stood, shouting questions. Cameras flashed. Greg tried to grab the microphone, but I held it firm. One investor raised his voice over the noise. "Is this true? Were you planning to transfer ownership?" Greg's face turned red. "Lies. All lies. She's bitter, jealous. Don't believe her." But Angela broke then. She snapped at him, her voice sharp. "You said it was foolproof, Greg. You said no one would ever know." The crowd gasped again. Phones shot up, recording every word. Greg spun on her, his voice a roar. "Shut up, Angela." It was too late. The truth was out. The investors gathered their papers, shaking their heads. One of them shouted, "This deal is dead. You'll hear from our lawyers." Greg stumbled back, his shoulders slumping, his mask finally gone. Angela covered her face, trying to hide from the cameras. I stood tall, my hands steady on the microphone. "This company is mine, and I will protect it from anyone who tries to take it, even if that person shares my last name." The hall erupted in noise, some shouting, some applauding, some simply stunned. But I didn't stay to watch the fallout. I walked off stage, leaving Greg to drown in the mess he had made. By the time I stepped outside, reporters were already waiting. The sun was bright, the air cool. I breathed deep, my chest rising with something that felt like freedom. The war wasn't over, but the battlefield had shifted. And Greg no longer had control. The fallout from the expo was swift. By the next morning, every investor had backed out. Articles ran with headlines about fraud, betrayal, and the spectacle at the hotel. Greg's phone rang non-stop. But no one called to support him. They wanted explanations. They wanted their reputations protected. And none of them wanted their names tied to his. Angela tried to disappear, but the photos and videos followed her wherever she went. At home, Greg paced the kitchen like a caged animal. His hair was uncombed, his shirt wrinkled. He slammed his fist against the counter, shouting about betrayal. "You destroyed me, Marta. Do you understand what you've done? We could have been set for life." I sat across from him, calm, my hands folded on the table. "I destroyed nothing. You did that yourself." He glared at me, eyes bloodshot. "I gave you everything. Without me, you'd be nothing but some tired woman rubbing backs in a basement." I leaned forward, my voice low. "Without me, you wouldn't have a dime to drink your bourbon with. Without me, there would be no business to steal. You tried to erase me, Greg, but the world saw the truth." For the first time, he looked shaken. His anger cracked into something smaller, weaker. He poured another drink, but his hand trembled. That evening, Sophia came over. Her face was pale, her eyes rimmed red. She held the newspaper in her hands. Angela's face splashed across the front page. She dropped it on the table and looked at me. "Is it true, Mum? Did Dad really with her?" I reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. "Yes, it's all true." Tears welled in her eyes. She sank into the chair, shaking her head. "Angela was my friend. I trusted her. I let her into this family." Greg stormed in from the living room. "It's not what you think, Sophia. She twisted everything. Your mother twisted everything. I was trying to build a future for us." Sophia stood, her voice trembling but fierce. "Stop lying, Dad. I saw the video. I heard your voice. You were going to steal from Mum. You were going to take everything she built." Greg's face turned red. "You're taking her side now? After everything I've done for you?" Sophia's voice cracked, but she didn't waver. "You haven't done anything for me except embarrass me. You ruined this family, and you used me to get close to her." He froze, caught in the truth of her words. For once, he had nothing to say. He grabbed his drink and walked out, slamming the door behind him. I held Sophia close as she cried, my hand stroking her hair. For years, I had protected her from the ugliest parts of her father. Now the truth was laid bare, and it broke her. But it also freed her. In the days that followed, I met with my lawyer. We filed for divorce, moving quickly before Greg could find a way to hide assets. The evidence Thomas had collected was ironclad: fraud, infidelity, intent to deceive. There was no way for Greg to fight it. When the papers were served, he exploded again. He shouted at me in the driveway, neighbors peeking through curtains. "You'll regret this, Marta. You'll end up alone, and everyone will see what a bitter old woman you are." I looked him straight in the eye and said, "I would rather be alone than chained to a liar." The words silenced him. He got in his car and drove off, tires screeching. Inside, I poured myself a glass of water and sat at the kitchen table. For the first time in months, the house felt still, not empty, but calm. Sophia visited often, helping me manage the spas. The employees rallied around me. Clients called to say they supported me, that they admired my strength. The business did not collapse as Greg predicted. If anything, it grew stronger. People wanted to be part of a brand owned by a woman who had survived betrayal and fought back. I spent long hours at the office, restructuring, making sure every contract was in my name alone. My name on the doors finally meant what it should have always meant: ownership, control. At night, I sat on the porch with Sophia, sipping tea as the crickets sang. She asked me once, "Do you regret it, Mum? All those years with him?" I thought for a moment before answering. No, regret gives him too much power. I learned, I built, and now I know what I will never accept again. She nodded, her hand resting over mine. I'm proud of you. The words filled me with something I hadn't felt in years. Not just relief, but hope. I had lost a husband, but I had not lost myself. I had gained back my dignity, and in that, I had everything I needed. The divorce moved quickly once the evidence was in front of the court. Greg's lawyer tried to argue that I was unstable, that I had fabricated the recordings, but the judge dismissed it after one listen. The photographs, the contracts, the transcripts, all told the same story. Fraud, betrayal, intent to deceive. The judge ruled in my favor. Every spa, every property, every account remained under my name. Greg was left with nothing but his shame. I walked out of the courthouse that day with Sophia at my side. The air felt clean, sharp against my skin. I wasn't smiling, but there was a quiet peace inside me. Justice wasn't loud. It was steady, and I carried it with me like armor. For weeks after, Greg tried to call. I ignored the first few, but one evening I answered. His voice was broken, stripped of the arrogance he once carried. "Marta," he said, pausing as if searching for the right words. "I lost everything." I stayed silent, waiting. "I never thought you would fight me like this," he continued. I thought you would let me take it and move on." I let out a long breath. "You underestimated me, Greg. You always did." He didn't argue. His voice dropped. "I don't expect forgiveness. I don't know who I am without it. Without you." For a moment, I almost felt pity. But pity is not forgiveness. Forgiveness is a choice, and it doesn't erase what was done. "You will have to live with the choices you made," I told him. "I will not carry them for you anymore." He whispered something that sounded like regret, then hung up. That was the last time I heard his voice. Angela vanished from town soon after. Her family cut ties, her friends disappeared. Word spread that she had tried to start over in another city, but the shadow of scandal followed her. I didn't need to know the details. Her punishment was built into the life she had chosen. At the spa, things bloomed again. Clients returned. Employees stood taller, knowing the business was safe. Sophia worked with me, taking on responsibilities I once shouldered alone. For the first time, it truly felt like a family business. One built on honesty, not lies. One afternoon, as I walked through the newest location, I paused to watch the staff laughing together, the scent of eucalyptus filling the air. My chest swelled with something warm. This was what I had fought for, not revenge, not money, dignity. A life I could stand in without shame. Still, there were nights when memories returned. Nights when I lay awake and thought of the man I had once loved, the man I thought I knew. It would have been easy to let bitterness take root, to live every day with anger. But I refused to give him that. Forgiveness didn't mean inviting him back. Forgiveness meant I was done letting him poison me. Justice had been served, and I had survived. That was enough. I sat with Sophia on the porch one evening, watching the sun set behind the hills. She leaned against me, her voice soft. "Do you think you'll ever speak to him again?" I shook my head slowly. "No, some doors stay closed, but I don't hate him anymore. Hate keeps you tied to the past. I want to live free." She nodded, her eyes glistening in the fading light. "I'm proud of you, Mum." The words filled me more than any victory in court ever could. I had not only saved what I built, but I had shown my daughter that strength wasn't about cruelty. It was about standing tall, even when the world tried to push you down. As the sky turned deep orange, I whispered to myself, "This chapter is closed." I didn't smile, but the peace on my face was real. Justice was mine. Dignity was mine. And at last, the future was mine too. If you stayed with me through this story, thank you. Stories like mine are about betrayal, justice, and the power to stand again after being broken. If you've ever faced something similar, you know the strength it takes. Please like this video, subscribe for more, and tell me in the comments what part of this story struck you the most.